Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we're going to be comparing the 5.7 by 28 to the 223 or 5.56 if you will to decide which one would be the best round for use in a PDW. Now we're going to have data from 5-inch handguns, 7.5-inch pistol builds, 10-inch pistol builds, and 16-inch carbines to go over with you today. Now I am not going to try to insult your intelligence by saying that the 5.7 by 28 is just as good or more powerful than the 223. At least not in today's video. That'll be in a couple of videos down the road, I'm sure. But what I am saying is this: there are trade-offs in everything in life, and only you can decide what is best for your needs. You're going to have to decide if the harder hitting power of the 223 or 5.56 is enough to offset what you're giving up by not being in the 5.7 by 28. Let's just start there. Now, proponents of the 223 will tell you that if you ever needed to use a PDW, personal defense weapon, to end a conflict, they will tell you that the 223 is better suited than the 5.7 to do so because it hits harder and therefore ends the issue more quickly. Now, that is a very valid viewpoint. Here's the flip side of that coin though. If you talk to any vet that's ever seen any live action, they will tell you that these engagements oftentimes have a funny way of going longer than originally anticipated. And if that is the case, you're going to have to manage two things very well. You're going to need to manage your ammo supply, and you're going to need to manage heat. Here's what I mean by that. If you've ever been able to rapid fire or shoot select fire AR with 223 or 5.56, then you'll know how fast they can heat up. You already know how fast they can heat up. And remember this: heat is the enemy of reliability. Also, consider this for a moment. If, let's say that there's a break in the action and you decide to do an ammo check, and you realize that you only have about 7 rounds left of 223. Or let's say that you do the exact same ammo check at the exact same time, and you realize that you have 42 rounds left of 5.7 by 28. I don't know about you, but I like option number 2 myself at that point. At any rate, if you like today's video, please remember to click the like button. Do subscribe, turn on the notifications icon if you haven't already done so, and as always, we're looking forward to your comments. Thanks again. The 3 bullets on the left, of course, are the 5.7 by 28, and then on the right, those 2 bullets are the 223s. Moving from left to right, we've got the American Eagle 40 grain full metal jacket. Here's another 40 grain bullet. This one is the SS 197 SR. This one here is a 27 grain hollow point. It is the SS 195 LF, meaning lead free. This is a bullet made by Wolf. It is a 62 grain hollow point, and the bullet on the far right is a 55 grain full metal jacket by PMC. We'll be coming back to this chart in a moment or two, but for right now, all I would like for us to do is just to focus on the powder charge and on the charge ratio for each of these cartridges. On the American Eagle 40 grain 5.7 by 28, it only has 4.3 grains of powder in it, which means that every 1 grain of gunpowder is trying to push 9.3 grains worth of bullet weight. When you move into the SS 197 SR, sometimes known as the blue tip bullet, you have a little more powder. You've got 4.8 grains of powder, meaning that every 1 grain of powder is now pushing 8.33 grains worth of bullet weight. But here's where it really starts to improve. On the SS 195 lead-free bullet, which is only a 27 grain bullet, you've got 7.5 grains of powder. So here you have a lighter bullet and more gunpowder involved. So a pretty respectable charge ratio. You've got 1 grain of powder trying to push 3.6 grains worth of bullet. When you look at something like a 223 62 grain Wolf hollow point, it has 20.3 grains of powder in it, meaning that for every 1 grain of powder, you're pushing 3.05 grains worth of bullet downrange. Notice that that's pretty similar to the 5.7 by 28 27 grain. And then when you take a look at something like your 223 55 grain, just a generic PMC bronze full metal jacket round, you've got about 25 grains worth of powder there, meaning that for every 1 grain of powder, you're only needing to push 2.2 grains worth of bullet weight downrange. Alright, moving from left to right, you've got the 40 grain full metal jacket, another 40 grain bullet that came off of the SS 197 SR. Notice you've got the 27 grain bullet right next to the 62 grain bullet. They're about as identical in height as what you could possibly get. The difference in weight is because the 27 grain bullet has been really hollowed out more than what you might think. Most of the weight on this 27 grain bullet is on the lower third of it, which is why when it hits, because it's the weight is distributed so much on the bottom of it, that's why when it hits, it initiates a tumbling action much more quickly. And then on the far right, you do have the 55 grain full metal jacket. Alright, well now that we've had a chance to take a look at that 27 grain bullet sitting right next to the 62 grain bullet, you can see how identical they really are, at least to the naked eye. The powder charge is almost identical as well. In terms of speed, from a 5-inch pistol, that 27 grain bullet, I've clocked it doing a little over 2,100 feet per second. I haven't yet had a chance to chronograph these 62 grain bullets from a 7.5-inch barrel though, but my best guesstimate is that they would be right around 2,200 and change feet per second. In terms of a 10-inch barrel, you're a little bit faster with the 62 grain bullet, but not by much. You're going to be at about 2,300 feet per second or a little better on that 27 grain bullet, compared to 2350 or a little better on the 62 grain. But here's where the difference really comes into play. If you can get into a 16-inch carbine, now your 62 grain bullet is moving along at about 2750 feet per second minimum, compared to only about 2400 feet per second on that 27 grain bullet. In terms of which of these bullets will probably keep the heat under control the best, my suggestion would be the Federal American Eagle for 2 reasons. Number one, it's only burning 4.3 grains of powder, and also that seems to be the bullet where you're going to have the smallest amount of surface area contacting the barrel as the bullet is flying through the inside of that barrel. In terms of the velocity, 1624 feet per second from a pistol. In terms of where you're picking up the most velocity, if you can get into a 10-inch barrel, you're going to be right around 1900 feet per second consistently, if not a little bit better. And then on a 16-inch carbine, you do pick up a little bit, but not much. It'll be about 2000 feet per second or just over that on a 16-inch barrel. In terms of the SS 197 SR, the blue tip, those are faster from a pistol pretty consistently than the American Eagle. About 100 feet per second faster, moving along at 1721 feet per second. But when you get into the 10-inch barrels and the 16-inch barrels, there's just not enough difference to really argue about. So I've got them listed basically at about the same numbers that I had for the American Eagle. And then naturally the best that you're probably going to find out there for speed is still going to be that 55 grain bullet. 2370 feet per second is what I'm chronographing those at, even with the 7.5-inch barrel. 10-inch barrel, 2400 and change minimum. And then when you get into about a 16-inch barrel, usually around 2900 feet per second. Alright, keep in mind that 210 rounds of ammo is a pretty common amount for infantry to carry. And when they do carry that 210 rounds, it's usually going to be NATO ball 62 grains. Sometimes it'll be a 55 grain bullet, but usually 62 grains. How much does all that ammo weigh, not even counting the magazines or anything else? Weighs about 5 pounds 9 ounces, or you could say 89 ounces. You can save a little bit of weight by going into the 55 grain bullet for like 223 or 556. That'll bring you from 89 ounces down to 85. but you really start to notice the weight reduction when you go into the 5.7 by 28. Either of those two 40 grain offerings are going to be about 50 ounces and change. When you go into the SS 195 LF, the 27 grain bullet, now you're down to 46 ounces. Another way of looking at it is this: 210 rounds of 62 grain ball ammo is going to weigh 93% more than the 27 grain 5.7. It's going to weigh 76% more than the 40 grain 5.7. Or if you're comparing it to the 55 grain, the 55 grain is going to weigh 85% more than the 27 grain. It'll weigh 68% more than the 40 grain. So in other words, if you're just going to compare 210 rounds of the 223 to 210 rounds of the 5.7, just a lot more weight on that 223 or 5.56, if you will. Here's a different way of looking at it. 210 rounds of 62 grain ammo. If you just wanted to keep the weight the same, you could carry 371 rounds of the Federal American Eagle 40 grain. You could also carry 371 rounds of the SS 197 SR, or you could carry 409 rounds of the SS 195 LF, which is that 27 grain bullet. So in other words, by not making the switch from that 62 grain bullet, if you don't want to make the switch, hey, that's fine with me, but you're cheating yourself out of 161 rounds by not being in the 40 grain bullets, or you're cheating yourself out of 199 rounds by not being in the 27 grain bullet. If you wanted to do that same comparison with the 55 grain, 210 rounds of the 55 grain generic ball ammo, you could be carrying 353 rounds of the 40 grain in either of those offerings, or you could carry 388 rounds of the 27 grain. So in other words, by not making the switch from the 55 grain over to like a 5.7 by 28, now you're down 143 rounds if you're talking about the 40 grain offerings, or you're down 178 rounds by not being into that 27 grain ammo. So that's something to certainly consider.